We got one more guest and one more segment for this week on Bang the Book Radio. That is this week's version of the Odds Report with Brent from DSI Sportsbook. Sharp money in both the college football and the NFL betting markets. Lots of stuff going on here. Always great to have Brent with us to analyze what we've seen out there and also forecast some of those line moves heading on into the weekend. All right, I'm joined now by Brent, the head risk manager down at DSI Sportsbook for this week's version of the Odds Report. We got a ton of stuff to get to here. We'll try to do it in a reasonable amount of time because I know Brent's got a lot of stuff going on here, especially with the NBA now underway. Brent, how's it going, man?
NBA underway. Yeah, actually, you know what? It's funny you mentioned that Clippers Lakers game opening night. That was fantastic for us in terms of handle. I mean, the line did move a lot. Clippers won outright, so that was good as well. But the volume on that game was just fantastic. So the NBA, it's my I enjoy playing the game of basketball. I just don't like watching the NBA style of play. It's just like I tell people, like, wake me up when there's 4 minutes left in the fourth quarter, and then we got a game.
Yeah, I can't blame you for that. And it's actually kind of a pretty good segue into our first game here with some sharp money on the college football side, because I'm sure there are some people that don't really like watching the service academies, playing the triple option, running the football a ton. Game 111-112 here is San Jose State and Army. We've seen some interesting side movement on this game. It's actually the total, though, that we're going to focus on with some sharp money.
Yeah, the one on the side has moved from 10.5 down to 9.5, and I just kind of gone with the flow on that one. I think some other books have also touched 9 already, but I just haven't seen sharp action myself on that game. And again, even speaking of public money, it's not one of those games that's going to attract a ton of public money, especially not early in the week. We're doing the show on Thursday with the game on Saturday, so you're not going to get a ton of action from the public on a game like this one. But I do have I've got a bit of public money on the total, and I've got sharp money that's going the same way with that. So it's not overwhelming. This way, the total was bet at over 51.5 by the sharps. I'm up to 54 right now. I think there's a couple places hanging around 53.5 still, but I'm at the top of the market at 54. Over 51.5 is where that sharp money came. And yeah, I can't really read much into this one. You got a couple of 3 and 4 teams that no one gets to see a whole lot. You've talked about before how when you're playing teams like Army and that, it's kind of tough to prepare for them because you don't see a style like that all season long.
Yeah, I'm surprised to see both the side movement and the movement on the over here because you got an early kickoff. Again, Army, that option team, they play very, very slowly. San Jose State not in a great travel spot, and yet they're taking a little bit of money on the side and the expectation of a high-scoring game. So game I talked about on Thursday's show. If you missed Thursday's show, make sure you swing back and check it out. But there's some interesting line movement. And again, we've talked about this before, and this is always a theme here. I mean, you don't pick the games that we talk about. We just talk about the ones that sharp players bet, and wherever they find value, they find it and use it.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be nice to talk about all the marquee games and only the marquee games and to have, lots of sharp action on every one of them, but that's just not the case. And, typically same with college basketball as well. You're typically going to find the smaller schools, the added games, the extra games and totals and stuff like that where sharps tend to find value, just generally speaking, a weaker market.
All right, so we jump down to a Big Ten game here. Game 127-128, Indiana and Nebraska. And we got a flip favorite situation here, Brent.
Yeah, I can't, read too much into this one in terms of trying to read and figure out what the injury situation is with each of these teams in terms of whether that's what's driving the movement or not. This line has flipped quite a bit. It was, I think, Indiana opened like -1.5 on the road here at Nebraska. We now have Nebraska as a 2.5 point favorite. Sharp monies come in here at +1 on Nebraska. Indiana, got a decent record there at 5-2. Nebraska's 4-3. But look at Nebraska. They've had a couple of tough, losses against top teams with Ohio State and I guess Minnesota it was as well. Quarterback situation for Indiana is Penix is a question mark. Martinez for Nebraska is question mark. Now we're getting some reports that he's taking more reps in practice this week. Nebraska was on the bye last week as well, so that probably helps him out in terms of Martinez being ready for this game. But I've got a wager count as well favoring Nebraska, about 2-1 that side, and sharp money as well. Like I said, it was at +1. We're up to 2.5 now.
Do you see -3 coming?
I hope not. No, I think the driving force now, after where we are now, sitting at 2.5, it's going to be the injury information of the quarterback now. If Martinez is confirmed to start, Penix is confirmed that he's not going to, I could see movement based on that. But, right now I think it's going to be injury information being the only thing that drives the number if it touches 3.
All right, so we go to the ACC here, game 135-136, Florida State and Syracuse, another game with some quarterback question marks, certainly on the Syracuse side after Tommy DeVito left last week. And maybe that has some correlation with the sharp movement that we've seen here.
Yeah, this one here, DeVito, I think he's questionable still, but I love how I always say the upper body injuries and questionable. It's like, do you know what happened to him? You know where he's hurt? Yeah, I've got over money is where the sharp money came on this one. This number did open, I believe, at 57 out there. I was at 57.5 when I got hit by the sharps. That was on the over 57.5. Interesting enough, don't see this very often, especially with teams like Syracuse and Florida State, but I got a count favoring the under from the public. So, a game like this, as I talked about, like the Army game, you're not going to get a ton of public money, but the bigger name schools, and Florida State definitely qualifies as one of them. You're going to get more public money even earlier during the week. And I do have a wager count about 2-1 favoring the under, yet I've got sharp money on the over 57.5. We're up to 59.5 as well right now. So it's a full 2-point move on that, despite the fact that the public's going the other way.
And the reason I say correlation is maybe some people just think that Clayton Welch, the backup quarterback, is a better option than Tommy DeVito. And maybe if DeVito's not going to play, could be the reason why we are seeing that total move around a little bit. Speaking of moving around, we'll take a pretty big leap down the board here. Game 187-188, Texas and TCU. And this is a game I've got some interest in, so I'm curious to hear what's going on in the market about it.
Yeah, this one, I do have sharp money on this game on the side. That was on Texas. This game, it's interesting. It's kind of like, dug in at -1 where we are right now. Texas at a pick is where I got sharp money. Now, in-house here, I've got a strong wager count, about 5-1 favoring Texas as well. So, I've seen this number touch 1.5. I've seen it come back to -1 where we are right now. So it's interesting. This one's kind of like hanging around one still. I think, out there, was it likely sharp money that came the other way, the +1.5? It may have been, but that's just me kind of reading into the movement, just because it did come at pick, the sharp money. We're up to 1, and it wasn't until 1.5 that it kind of got bet back down. You talk about push and pull on numbers. Now, it's not like 1's going to be necessarily a key number at, 1.5 is going to be a key number in college football, but that was the case in terms of what, where the number came back down. But I wouldn't be surprised, based on my count and stuff, to see that go back up to 1.5. Texas, I mean, they've had a couple of losses against top teams. I think they've only lost to LSU and Oklahoma. TCU sitting at 3-3 with sitting at 500. They've lost 3 of the 4. So, I kind of side with the sharps on this one, but I kind of wish that sometimes that I had taken the sharp money back on TCU at +1.5 to know it was sharp money and not just deep pockets.
Well, and here's another game, and we talked about this a lot last week during the college football portion of the segment. We've got a 5-point line movement down on the total for this game. We've got several totals that have gone down again this week. Miami, Florida, and Pitt. That's dropped 4.5, 5 points. You got several games, again, with a lot of movement down on the total. And, I don't know if it's weather related, if it's just late in the season, position change, or, player changes, stuff like that. But a lot of movement down, and actually quite a few games going up, too. It seems like a lot of sharp money in the totals market out there in college this week. Maybe not at your shop, but somewhere.
Yeah, I know. Even like you talk like Tulane and Navy, for example, that's been like a 6.5 point move on the total. There's been, you kind of expect I would say a comfortable move on a college football total. You're talking like 3.5 points. Obviously, if you don't have to move more than 1 point in either direction, that's great. But you do see that a lot where, this later in the season, for some reason, whether it's, injury information, whether it's weather information, you do tend to see, greater moves. But usually it's correlated because, a factor like weather or injuries.
All right, so I gave you shit last week for not giving me the games in rotation order, and now I've got to give it to myself because we've got to circle back to a game that I missed here. Game 181-182, staying in the Big 12, though, Oklahoma and Kansas State. My apologies for missing this one, but what's going on with this game?
Yeah, you're right. You always give me shit, and then you jump down like, hey, wait a second. I got my finger on the pulse here. Wait a second. Anyhow, yeah, Oklahoma, talk about laying big numbers in sharps, definitely do that. They did in this case as well. Again, when you're talking college football, basically, once you get above 10, there's no such thing as a key number that you worry about. And we got hit with sharp money at minus 21. Oklahoma's just rolling up on teams, so it's maybe not a bit too much of a surprise. You really want to put a number up there that you think is high, but just not too high. Obviously, minus 21 was not high enough. I got bet by the sharps at minus 21. I've taken pretty much just public money since then. We're up to 24 right now. There is, I think, a 23.5 out there, a couple books as well, a couple of 24s. So I'm staying at the high end of the market based on the sharp money coming at minus 21. And like I said, Oklahoma just rolling up on teams. Kansas State, I think they lost to Baylor. I guess that was pretty handily. So that was kind of like a, if you want to look at a measuring stick there. This is a tough kind of spot, though, I think, for Oklahoma. It's kind of, maybe when the final score comes in, I won't be surprised if the Sharps laid the 21 with Oklahoma. But their next two games, they're Iowa State, who's a top 20 team, 23 team, I think, and then the following week they're at Baylor. So they got a couple of tough games coming up, and here they are, a big, massive 3+ touchdown favorite on the road here.
Yeah, and we saw people bet against Kansas State last week in the TCU game. So maybe this is just a fade of Kansas State. Some people have isolated the Wildcats as a team that they want to bet against. That certainly seems like it's the case here, potentially in this game. So, sorry, my apologies for missing that one, but we'll stay in the Big 12 again. Game 195, 196, Texas Tech and Kansas. And, as I was looking through the lines on Monday for this game, or for this week in college football, this one caught my eye, and I thought, okay, this one looks a little bit low. Turns out maybe it is.
Yeah, well, you're obviously one of the sharper guys out there, Adam. There's no dispute about that, and this is just proof of that. Sharp money, yeah, Texas Tech. Why am I chuckling as I say that? I can't even say that. Adam, you're a sharp bettor. I can't say it with a straight face.
It's okay. I get it. I'm not. I got it.
No, when I reach in my own pocket, it's just for fun. That's all. Texas Tech, yeah, I got sharp money on Texas Tech actually at the -3, -115. So this number had kind of ticked down and then gone up since then. 3 -115 is where I got bet. The number is like 4.5, pretty much market wide. So that's pretty strong indication that across the board everyone is favoring Texas Tech there. My count, you can't really say there's public money driving this once it's gone up to 3.5 and 4 because my count's pretty much dead even on this one as well. So Texas Tech, you're looking at a team who's lost 4 games on the year, but as you kind of expect with these teams, they're always got tough schedules, and this is case with Texas Tech as well, having lost to top ranked teams like Iowa State, Baylor, and Oklahoma. So really no shame in that. And here they are, getting the love even though they're on the road at Kansas.
Well, and there's no sharp money, at least not at DSI, but it does appear that there's some sharp money out there in the market on the total because a lot of under movement the last 2 weeks, and this one's gone up almost a touchdown at some places. Yeah,
it could be, what you kind of expect. If you got sharp money going with Texas Tech, you might make this assumption that they're going to, have a ton of success offensively, as these teams tend to do sometimes.
All right, so let's talk about the marquee games here. And we don't have any sharp action, at least not at DSI to discuss. Maybe there's some sharp action out there in the marketplace somewhere, and especially with the Notre Dame game that we'll get to last here. But 199-200, Wisconsin and Ohio State. You and I were talking before we started recording that, this number probably wouldn't have opened 14 had the two teams not done what they did last weekend, with Ohio State winning big and Wisconsin losing outright as a 31-point favorite.
Yeah, we both had, kind of our own numbers. I myself had Wisconsin as like around a 12.5 point favorite. That was before the games last week. And this one, it has opened like, I think the initial opening number was 14.5. I believe it got bet down initially. So we're seeing kind of a good amount of volume and a lot of push and pull in the market. It seems anything around 13.5 and 14.5 is getting money both ways, taking the plus and laying the 13.5. So this is a really high volume game for us already, which is fantastic. My wager count is almost dead even on this, which really reflects how the line seems to be doing its job in terms of splitting the action. Like I said, we're not really concerned about a number like 14, a game like that landing. So if we could write $1 million at -13.5 and take $1 million the other way at plus 14.5, we'd gladly do that. It's just not a number you worry about, and we're getting really good action both ways. Even at like just 14, I've got slightly more Ohio State money, but nothing right home, just very, very slightly. My money's pretty much dead even as well. So just from what I see so far, this number looks like it's bang on. There could be some influential money out here that drives it on Saturday, but I think this number is just going to kick around between 14 and 14.5 until kickoff.
So basically, you're rooting for anything except for Ohio State winning by 2 touchdowns.
That would be ideal, yeah. But I mean, you hopefully you don't have to toss and turn and like worry about games, college football games landing on 14.
All right, so we jumped down a couple spots here. Game 203, 204. Big one in the SEC West, Auburn and LSU. LSU double-digit favorite, deservedly so. I mean, they've been great. They're number 2 in the country in yards per play. They're a top 30 defense, and they're laying a big number here at home against Auburn.
Yeah, this one too. I mean, I'm kind of surprised that this number's ticked down. It was higher. I think it was like 12 and a half that I saw. And I was getting good two-way action, even at that number. So I've seen decent action basically throughout on this one. I've kind of just been trending with the market down towards the 10 and a half where we are right now. Even at 11, basically I had good two-way action. But again, 10 and a half and 11 is really, you just kind of breeze through a number like that and go with the market. So everyone's sitting 10 and a half right now. I kind of thought I'd get a little more support for LSU. I thought we might be seeing this number going up rather than kind of hang around just the slight tick downwards. But pretty much good two-way action as well. I mean, I do have a wager count that slightly favors LSU. I do think this number is probably, if it's going to trend one way, it's probably going to trend up rather than down. But 10 and a half, 11, and again, being kind of like a dead number, I think it's going to hang around where it is.
Something that is kind of interesting to me, we've talked about looking for context clues out there in the market and, using your odds screen to see where some of these numbers may go. Some of the sharpest in the offshore market and some of the exchanges already down to 10 here on this game from what I'm seeing. And that's really interesting to me because you've got to expect an influx of LSU public money just because they're such a sexy team with all the points. I'm a little bit surprised to see a couple of 10s pop up, this early in the process on Thursday evening.
Yeah, it's interesting because I also think it's valuable for players out there, bettors out there, to look at the sports book and get a good feel for what kind of action they attract. I mean, you've got a couple of the biggest one of them being European based, and one of them, of course, being offshore down here in Costa Rica, who just like take a ton of max bets from guys. So you get kind of good influence from both those markets, and also you've got your lower end margin books, and you've got your more public driven books and see where those numbers go. So I think if you kind of get an idea and just kind of dig around, you can find it online, just kind of get an idea of profile in terms of what books, kind of book or cater to what kind of action. You get a feel for where the sharp money is and public money just by reading into the numbers.
So you feel like 10 and a half, 11 is about good for this? I mean, the total's gone up a little bit. I think the total probably continues to go up, but you think the side is pretty well lined right about now?
Yeah, I do. If anything, I mean, I could see it tick up again. That's just based on my wager count, and I've seen decent support for both sides of this game. So it's another one where I'm getting good two-way action on it and just kind of going with the market. But from what I've seen in-house, if I could predict where this number was go, I would think it's going to tick up maybe a point or a half a point from where we are now.
All right, one other marquee game here, and then we'll switch over to the NFL side. That is Notre Dame and Michigan, game 207, 208. Again, a flipped favorite scenario here, so somebody out there must be taking some, pretty influential Notre Dame money.
Yeah, this game, I guess, Notre Dame, we're sitting here as a -1 point, -1 favorite now on the road at Michigan. The number did open -2.5 with Michigan on the bottom at home. It's good for us always when you get, public teams that are like this. I mean, Michigan's obviously a very high profile team, and Notre Dame as well. I mean, just tons of people like Notre Dame for whatever reason. I've got, so far, my wager count is favoring Notre Dame of about 2-1. It's nothing that's nothing substantial on a game like this because it is going to get a ton of betting volume. This, the money that I did take, the bulk of it was actually on Notre Dame +1. So maybe they kind of read into that one. Obviously, I didn't get bet too heavy at all on +1.5 or even +2 the other way. So yeah, there's an old adage when they say like when a small favorite becomes a small dog, you find value there. And then, of course, you got Michigan at home as well. So it's kind of like something to look into there and see where this one goes. I can't really see where this one's going to go just because my wager count does favor the road team in Notre Dame. But I just can't see this one going much higher than it is right now. If anything, I could see it coming back down. But, that's just my feel for that game.
Well, and unlike the other two marquee games we've talked about, this is a late game. So this one's going to have probably the biggest public handle of the three because it's at 7:30 and we talk about chase games and all that kind of thing. Do you feel like maybe by the time we get to kickoff, it winds up a sharp versus public split type game?
I don't know. This is one of those games where you could have, there's going to be so much public money involved in this game that they could, ping pong the number back and forth. There is enough, influential public money. When I say influential, I mean deep pockets who can bounce these numbers around. If the Sharps haven't got too involved at this point, it could be just a game where it just gets a massive amount of public money. It could be the Sharps stay right off this one. I really don't know.
I certainly wouldn't blame them. I mean, you've got two teams I think are kind of a little bit tough to get a pulse on, especially in these marquee games. So should be a good one at least, but maybe not the best one from a betting standpoint. We move over to the NFL side of the spectrum here, and last week, Brent, we had a bunch of games around 3 and 4, a bunch of games down below the key number of 3. This week, of the 15 games we have, only 4 of them, with pretty low lines. You've got a couple of 2s, you got a couple of 4s out there, but by and large, a lot of big numbers this week.
Yeah, and then the kind of unfortunate thing for that with us always is you get people looking at these, double-digit favorites, and you're looking, okay, teasers. So we're going to be teasing that team. So, you got Pittsburgh at home. We're going to tease that. We're going to tease New England at home, a double-digit favorite. We're going to tease that one. New Orleans to Arizona, all that kind of stuff. So, you can't book to teasers. I know some places out there put up, I guess you call it a false line where they'll jack up a number, but call it 10.5 dog minus 135, just so 10.5 is the number that you get stuck with on a teaser and stuff like that. So I see, that happening a lot with these games in terms of the double digit home favorites that we have this weekend.
All right. So the first game here with some sharp activity, one of the, more reasonable lines, at least at open, it's kind of gotten away a little bit. Game 259, 256, the Jets and the Jaguars. What's going on with this one?
Yeah. You kind of talk about, sexy team. I think Jacksonville has kind of turned into a team like that, mostly because of the quarterback. I mean, it's funny. He's one of those guys who, if you look at his numbers with Minshew, his numbers just aren't great. Yet he just kind of finds a way to win. That's kind of one of the things with this guy, and I like it too. I mean, it's kind of like Fitzmagic last year with the Buccaneers when they were rolling up all those kind of points. It was kind of fun to get behind a team like that. Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to say it's sexy to be betting Jacksonville again, because I don't know if that's ever been the case. But we do have sharp money on Jacksonville. Now this one's moved just a ton. I initially got bet by sharp money at minus 4.5, which obviously is real big, based on the fact of where we are right now. Usually once you get hit at 4.5, once you're 5 and 5.5, you kind of go through those numbers without, kind of freely. You don't worry about too much like that, 5s and 5.5. But when you start going through 6s and on to 7s and stuff like that, then you're talking about substantial moves. This one has gone to 6.5. I've even seen some books touching minus 7, dog 20 on this one. So just a ton of support for Jacksonville. They're up to, like I said, minus 7, minus 120 at home to the Jets. Minus 4.5, like I said, is where the sharp money came in. Again, this is not going to be, one of those marquee games where we get a ton of public money involved in it, but I do have, kind of surprisingly for me at least, I do have a bet count of about 2-1 favoring the Jets. I just didn't expect that. I just figured, because people, like the quarterback for Jacksonville and talking about him and how, what he's done so far with, a team that just really hasn't been that good for very long. And they're, even now they're just sitting at 3 and 4. So, but I guess, the Jets and just how bad they've looked recently, and that game last night, their last game out was just, they were just bad.
You know what it is? It's facial hair. It's the mustache from Minshew. It's the Fitzmagic beard. People gravitate towards facial hair, man.
Yeah, that mustache. I mean, it is. It's something.
It's epic. It is very, very solid. Everybody should have a mustache, I think. All right, let's go to game 265, 266 here. Arizona and New Orleans. And obviously this line's kind of been a little bit of a state of flux, because at first we thought Bridgewater, then we thought Breeze. Maybe to some degree we're not entirely sure. Maybe that uncertainty has kind of led to some of the sharp activity we've seen here in this game.
Yeah, I mean, you get that at this time of the season. We're talking, week 8, injuries and stuff like that play a big part in terms of how we have to manage our risk. And we talk about how we've talked about before, how we have to go, lower limits and early in the week, and we kind of hold on to lower limits when there's so much uncertainty about players in certain games. We'd like to be full limits all the time as much as we can. But, with Arizona as well, you've got the running back, David Johnson, who's, he was probable last week, I think, and he was upgraded to playing on last week on Sunday. And then I think he played one snap, didn't feel right, and then left the game. But obviously his backup did real well. But Johnson is a question mark there. Breeze has been upgraded to questionable, so questionable is an upgrade for him. Kamara, he's questionable every week, it seems. So a lot of uncertainty with this game. I do have sharp money on the total, and that came on the under. So under 49 is where I got sharp money on this one. This number's down to 47.5 right now, so a 1.5 move. I don't know, like if Breeze is going to play, I don't think that trends toward the under, but it's just all the other injuries, and probably more likely that he doesn't play. Just personally, the way Bridgewater's played so far, the fact that they're a 10-point favorite at home, I just don't see them rushing Breeze. But not that I know anything about that or can read into it. Perhaps no surprise. It's funny. With Arizona, the high flying offense or whatever you want to call it that they've got. I've got a wager count. Public money's been going with the over recently with them. My wager count about 2-1 towards the over. So if you want to look for a sharp and public split, I definitely have it with this game in terms of the public going over and the sharp money on the under.
Well, and again, I mean, we've talked about this before, but you talk about the differences in risk management between college football and the NFL. You see several totals in college football moving 4.5, 5 points this week. The biggest move on the NFL board is, 1.5 or 2 points. So again, it just speaks to the differences of the two markets.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, NFL, and again, there's just so much more information known about there. And it's also about, for us, it's not just, profiling customers, it's profiling games and stuff like that as well. Because you kind of get a feel for, what your risk profile on a certain game is going to be based on how much action you expect to have on that game. We're going to have less, betting volume on Jacksonville and the Jets for sure, as opposed to a game like, say, one of the marquee games like Kansas City and Green Bay, for example, on Sunday night. Get a whole lot different action, so you have to profile a game differently. And based on how you move differently as well, because you have to be a little more aggressive to try and get two-way money back with the smaller bet games.
All right, so we jump down to game 267, 268, just moving one spot here. Oakland and Houston. Houston pretty much painted 7 market wide. Now there were some 6.5s. The super contest line in the segment I just talked about is 6.5, but a lot of places now 7. What's going on with this game over there at DSI?
Yeah, I mean, this number on the side, we're sitting at 6.5 ourselves. There are some 7-dog-15s out there, 7-dog-20. So I guess that's kind of where this number is trending. We talk about how much totals move and stuff like that in the NFL versus college football. This is one that has moved quite a bit more. It has kind of gone from 49 where I got sharp money, so I'll get that out of the way. Sharp money in the over 49. It had gone all the way up to 51.5 and even touched 52. Started to get a little bit buyback at 52, so we're back down to 51.5. But sharp money on the over 49. No surprise as well that I got public money on the over here. I got a wager count straight, quite a strong wager count on the over here of 3-1. And I think I don't like the fact that I've got the public money on the over the same way as the sharp. But if I was a better reaching my own pocket, I'd probably be going the same way. I think Oakland, if you look at their offense, they've been really, really good. Recent weeks they've got kind of got everything together. Their tight end has been fantastic for them. The running game's been fantastic. And if you give Carr time, he's just not a bad quarterback. And the flip side of that, of course, is that Watson, if you give him time, he's been absolutely deadly. And Houston defensively, I don't think. I think the consensus out there is that their defense is just not very good in terms of their defensive backs. They've got, if they get good pressure on the quarterback, they do okay. But their defensive backs, I think if you give any time, they can be exposed. So I'm afraid that the public's going with the sharp money on this one because I think they're on the right side here, Adam.
And you think this number closes 7?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. Like if it went 7 flat, I wouldn't be surprised if sharp money came back on Oakland. I think Oakland's kind of like a sneaky, undervalued team.
All right, so we jumped down to game 271, 272. Again, late on the rotation board, but this is a game that's in the 1 o'clock window here. So an early kickoff for Denver. Indianapolis, mostly 6 market wide, although there are some 5.5s and a stray 6.5 that I'm seeing on my odds screen. What's going on with you guys over there?
Yeah, I got sharp money on Denver here plus 6.5. This is a clear sharp and public split. I've just got overwhelming money in favor of the Colts here. So I wouldn't be surprised if this number kind of hangs around. We're actually at 5.5 right now. I wouldn't be surprised if this one ticked right back up. But plus 6.5 is where I got bet with a sharp money. Just a massive wager count, about 7-1, favoring the other way in terms of the Colts. So once you're kind of down from the 6.5 down to 6, and then when you've got to go with the market. Once you go. You pretty much move quite freely when I talked about the other game, when you're going from with the Jacksonville game, when you're going from 5 to 5.5, if you're down to 4.5 or what have you, you kind of move freely across those numbers. You don't worry too much about the 5s and 5.5. So I could see this one kind of sticking around the 5.5 or 5. It did touch 5 and kind of bounced back up to 5.5. So it seems to kind of finally found its range there. But I think this is one of those games where we're definitely going to need Denver. Like I said, the sharp money came at plus 6.5. So we'll happily side with that sharp money. But public is just, overwhelmingly one way with the Colts. And, just on the surface, it's easy to see that. I mean, Denver just looks awful, and the Colts look like a very solid team once again at 4-2.
I gotta say, as I'm kind of looking through the board here, this looks like the only really well-defined sharp versus public split game in the NFL this week.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I do have a little bit more money or betting action on the Jets, but that's definitely not one of those sharp public splits. I think the total, like I said, on Arizona is going to be one of those cases, just because the public still has this thing with New Orleans being a high-scoring offense, so they're going to go over, and they have done that. They're also with Murray in terms of putting up a lot of points, and as I said, the under money already came at 49.
All right, well, I know you're not excited about the start of college basketball. I know a lot of people are, and a lot of people will be wishing that there was college basketball on Monday night so they didn't have to watch Miami versus Pittsburgh, and can't really blame them for that. We've definitely seen much better Monday night football games. But, hey, I guess betting kind of makes everything interesting, so what's going on in this one?
Yeah, it's a tough one. You talk about like the Pittsburgh in terms of, how the trades that they've made, their players they got rid of in the offseason and such. Miami just flat out being a bad team. You've got the injuries to the quarterback with Roethlisberger, stuff like that for Pittsburgh. So, maybe it's, someone back there in the NFL when they're doing out the schedule, they thought this might be a good game, but they were quite a bit off on this one. Miami, at least, in recent weeks, they have shown a bit of life with Fitzpatrick at quarterback and taking over for Rosen. Now they're still 0-6 on the year, so it's not like he's had, that much of an impact or been that great. But if you look at, I think it was last week, they were actually up 14-9 at the half. That was a game at Buffalo. They ended up losing that by 10 points. The week before that, they lost by 1 to Washington. Now, okay, yeah, Washington, that's there's not much of a litmus test there. But Miami, at least they're showing some life. And weeks and weeks now, they've been getting support from sharp bettors. In this case, is no different here. Miami plus 16.5 is where I got bet from sharp money. I think it opened as high as 17 out there with the initial opening numbers. 16.5 is where I got bet here, plus 16.5 on Miami. We're down to 14 right now. I know some places are like 14 minus 15, others are 14 dog 15. So kind of sitting, and kind of digging in at the number 14. So I don't see this number moving off 14. I think it's kind of found a spot there. I say it's really tough to get behind Miami, but the sharp money's been with them for several weeks now, taking the big numbers with them. It could be just a value grab, thinking that the professional level team shouldn't be 17-point dogs.
Well, Brent, we covered a lot of ground here, a lot of different games on this week's version of the Odds Report. As always, man, we appreciate your time. Thank you so much for sharing your insights, and we'll talk to you again next week.
Always fun, Adam. Thanks for having me on.